Introduction to the Galactic Council and Cable's situation. The chamber of the Galactic Council was cold and sterile, a harsh contrast to the emotions swirling beneath its high, domed ceiling. The air hummed with the quiet sound of recycled oxygen, thick with the weight of centuries-old decisions. Commander Cable Barnes stood at rigid attention in front of the council, his battle-worn uniform a testament to the many missions he had endured. The dim lighting flickered slightly, reflecting the tension in the room. Around him, alien figures from every corner of the galaxy watched with unreadable expressions. Their faces, whether reptilian, crystalline, or gaseous, all shared one thing in common: disdain. Among them, the Celian Chancellor, with its leathery scales and sharp, angled features, spoke in a voice dripping with condescension. "Commander Barnes," it began, its words slow and deliberate, as if savoring every syllable, "while we acknowledge your contributions to our recent victory, your unorthodox tactics and blatant disregard for protocol cannot go unchallenged." Cable's jaw tightened. He had heard this before: alien politicians and their false praises. The council saw him as a loose cannon, a problem to be contained. He knew what was coming: the familiar dance of power, manipulation, and dismissal. "Your methods saved your lives," Cable muttered under his breath, but it was barely audible in the tense silence. The Chancellor continued, oblivious to the sarcasm. "We have decided to bestow upon you a special assignment. Consider it a reward for your service." Cable's heart sank. It was a trap. He had no doubt about that. The council wasn't offering him a reward, they were setting him up to fail, to remove him from their midst without so much as a trace. A death sentence wrapped in diplomatic jargon. "There is a remote planet on the fringes of the Maelstrom Nebula, Vexus Prime," the Chancellor said, its voice low, almost purring. "We need you to survey the surface and report on its potential resources, or strategic value." Cable's mind raced. Vexus Prime. A planet known for its ion storms, plagued by monstrous predators, and haunted by the stories of those who had never returned. The kind of place the council would bury someone they no longer wanted. "I'm a soldier, not a dim prospector," Cable growled, his voice rising despite his attempt to stay calm. "You are what we tell you to be," snapped the Archon of the Kian Collective, its crystalline eyes flashing in irritation. "This is not a request, Commander. It is an order." Cable's fists clenched at his sides. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, but he knew better than to show weakness. The mission wasn't just an assignment, it was a death sentence, plain and simple. "I understand," Cable bit out through gritted teeth, standing tall. "I'll leave within the hour." As Cable exited the council chamber, the walls seemed to close in on him, the weight of the assignment pressing down like the gravity of a dying star. They thought they had him cornered. They thought they could bury him on some forgotten rock at the edge of the galaxy. But what they didn't understand was that Cable Barnes was not a man who would be forgotten. He had stared death in the face countless times, and each time, he had come back stronger. This was just another challenge to be conquered. With a grim smile playing at the corners of his lips, Cable knew he would make the council regret this decision. He'd show them what humanity was capable of. The hangar bay was buzzing with activity as Cable made his way to his ship, his movements deliberate and focused. The sleek Raven-class scout ship stood ready, gleaming in the soft light of the bay. The hum of its engines was a comforting sound to Cable, a reminder of the countless times he had flown into the unknown and emerged victorious. His boots echoed on the metal floor as he approached the ship, his fingers brushing over the familiar controls. This was home. The ship had been with him through the worst of times, and it would carry him through whatever horrors awaited on Vexus Prime. As he worked through the final system checks, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Cable, a young officer called, rushing toward him. It was Sora, an Enin with blue skin, flushed with the strain of running. "I have your mission briefing," she said, holding out a data pad, her fingers trembling slightly. Cable took the pad with a curt nod, glancing over the bare-bones details of the mission. Coordinates, vague directives, no maps, no intel on local fauna. It was a setup, pure and simple. "Is it true? The Council is sending you to Vexus Prime?" Sara asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Looks that way," Cable replied flatly, his eyes never leaving the pad. "I'll be fine." Sara hesitated, her gaze flickering nervously to the jagged scar along Cable's jaw, a reminder of the time he had narrowly escaped death in a battle with a Thayan berserker. "No one comes back from Vexus Prime," she whispered. Cable turned to face her, offering a reassuring smile, though it was edged with cold determination. "Relax, kid. I've faced worse. I'll be back before you know it." Sara nodded, her expression softening. "Good hunting, Commander." With the final preparations complete, Cable boarded the ship, his mind racing with the implications of the mission ahead. The hatch closed behind him with a hiss, sealing him in the cockpit. The familiar hum of the engines sent a wave of calm through him, and as his hands moved instinctively over the controls, the ship rumbled to life. As the ship ascended, Cable allowed himself one last glance at the planet that had once been his home. The Council's chamber was now a distant memory, and with it, their false hopes of breaking him. He'd return to show them exactly what they had underestimated. The stars streaked across the sky as the ship surged forward, heading for the unknown. The journey was quiet, uneventful. Hyperspace was always a blur of time and space, an endless tunnel between destinations. But as Cable's ship dropped out of hyperspace, reality reasserted itself with a brutal clarity. Vexus Prime loomed in front of him, its surface a patchwork of sickly greens and browns, an angry red storm system swirling above it. The planet was scarred, its atmosphere crackling with ion storms that lit up the sky in blinding flashes. To any other observer, it would seem like a place best left untouched. But Cable saw something different, a challenge, an opportunity to prove that no matter how vicious, no matter how alien the world, he could survive. The ship began its descent, the atmosphere growing thick as the ship entered the turbulent clouds. Lightning crackled around them, striking far too close for comfort. Cable's knuckles whitened as his grip tightened on the controls, guiding the ship through the storm. The final approach was chaotic. Vexus Prime's surface was a nightmare, jagged peaks of obsidian rock reaching up toward the sky, swathed in fog. The air was heavy with toxic gases that seemed to twist the landscape into something otherworldly. It was a place that had broken many before him. Yet here he was, about to carve his name into its dark history. With a sudden jolt, the ship hit the ground, landing with a soft thud in a relatively stable patch of ground. The landing gear sank slightly into the spongy, fungal soil, and Cable powered down the engines, his heart still pounding from the descent. He stepped out of the airlock, the overwhelming stench of decay and fetid swamp air assaulting his senses. The planet was alive in a way that felt unnatural, a place where survival was a constant struggle. As his boots sank into the wet, spongy ground, Cable knew that this mission, this planet, would not be like any other. He was walking into a living nightmare, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going down without a fight. Cable's rifle was slung across his back, his eyes scanning the dim, misty surroundings as he moved deeper into the jungle. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twigs on the ground put him on edge. He knew the creatures of this planet, the ones the Council had warned about. but nothing could prepare him for what emerged from the shadows. It was massive, a hulking beast with rippling blue fur and sharp, gleaming horns that twisted like obsidian daggers. Its eyes amber and intense locked onto Cable with a level of intelligence that sent a chill down his spine. It was an apex predator, one of the deadliest creatures on Vexus Prime. And yet, it didn't attack. The beast stood there, watching him, its powerful chest rising and falling with each breath. It seemed almost curious. Cable's hand hovered over his rifle, his instincts screaming at him to react, but something in the creature's gaze made him pause. He exhaled slowly, lowering the weapon just a fraction. "Easy there, big fella," Cable muttered, his voice surprisingly steady in the thick, heavy air. "I'm not here to cause trouble." The creature snorted, a puff of hot breath misting in the cold air, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, it turned, and melted back into the shadows. The forest swallowed it whole, leaving only the sounds of the wild behind. Cable let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His heart still raced, but he didn't move. He wasn't sure what had just happened, whether it was an encounter with a creature that would kill him on sight or something more mystical. But one thing was clear: this planet had a way of throwing the unexpected at you. And Cable Barnes was going to need all of his wits and instincts to survive. The deeper Cable ventured into Vexus Prime, the more the planet seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air was thick, suffused with the scent of decay and the faint, acrid tang of sulfur. It was as if the atmosphere itself was alive, breathing in unison with the planet's tortured landscape. Each breath he took felt heavy, laden with microscopic spores that clung to his skin and made his every movement sluggish. The ground beneath him was soft and treacherous, the spongy, fungus-covered terrain sinking beneath his boots with each step, as if the planet was trying to swallow him whole. The dense, humid jungle pressed in on him from every side, the twisted, alien trees reaching up like bony fingers clawing at the sickly green sky. In the distance, the howl of some unseen predator sent a shiver down Cable's spine. The cries were low, guttural, and carried an undercurrent of menace that made his blood run cold. Every crackling rustle of the wind, every whisper of the trees, felt like a warning. Something was out there, watching. Cable kept moving, though. His experience as a soldier had prepared him for the worst of environments, and this was no different. But the silence of the jungle, the way it seemed to hold its breath, was unsettling. There was no wind to carry the sound of distant footsteps, no animals calling out to one another. It was as though the entire ecosystem was lying in wait. Then came the first real test. The swamp appeared out of nowhere, a slick, black mass of bubbling water and shifting mud that seemed to stretch on forever. It was treacherous terrain, and Cable's boots were already sinking into the thick, oozing muck. With every step, the ground seemed to move beneath him, the quicksand-like bog trying to drag him under. His heart pounded as he waded through, each step slower, more deliberate. The air around him hummed with the electricity of the storms that raged above, but down here, there was no escape from the suffocating humidity and the sticky, viscous soil that clung to his legs. Just as his foot sank deeper into the muck, he heard a snap, a sound not unlike the cracking of dry branches. Cable froze. It came again, closer this time, followed by a low growl. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the swamp fighting back, it was something hunting him. Instinct kicked in. Cable gripped the handle of his plasma rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. The growl grew louder, coming from behind a thick patch of algae-covered rock. A massive, scaled shape slithered through the foliage, its eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. Cable didn't hesitate. The creature's jaws snapped as it lunged at him, but Cable was faster, ducking beneath its strike and rolling to the side. His plasma rifle fired once, twice, hitting the creature in the chest. It reeled, momentarily stunned by the blast, before turning and retreating into the shadows of the swamp. Cable stood motionless for a moment, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he surveyed the jungle around him. It was then that he realized the creatures here were not just animals. They were intelligent, aware of his every movement, and quick to strike if given the chance. He had to stay vigilant, keep moving, or become prey. Hours passed, and Cable's muscles burned with the effort of pushing through the thick, oppressive forest. His skin was slick with sweat, his body covered in the sticky residue of the planet's unrelenting climate. His mind was focused on survival, one step, one breath at a time, when the ground beneath him suddenly gave way. The earth trembled, and before he could react, Cable found himself falling, his arms flailing as the ground collapsed beneath his feet. He tumbled into a deep, hidden ravine, the sound of the earth shifting and cracking echoing in his ears. His body hit the ground with a thud, and the world spun as he tried to regain his bearings. His rifle was gone, lost in the fall, and for a moment, he lay still, the air knocked out of him. The landscape around him was dark and foreboding, the walls of the ravine jagged and slick with moss. But there was something else, something more pressing. A low, rasping voice echoed from the shadows. "You are not from here, outsider." Cable's eyes shot open, and his gaze fell on the figure standing just beyond his reach. It was humanoid, but its skin was a mottled gray, the veins beneath its surface glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The creature's head was elongated, crowned with curling horns, and its eyes that seemed to shimmer with ancient knowledge studied him intently. "You are one of them," the creature said. "The ones they call humans." Cable Barnes, the warrior. Cable's heart skipped a beat. How did it know his name? Who was this creature? The being stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, its eyes never leaving Cable's. "I am Kisan, shaman of the Vexan," the creature continued. "I have been watching you since you arrived. You seek to survive, but you do not know the truth of this world." Cable's mind raced as he stood, dusting himself off. He kept his distance, warily eyeing the creature. "What are you talking about?" Kisan's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Vexus Prime is not the desolate hellscape they want you to believe. It is a sanctuary, a refuge for those the Council has cast aside. The exiles. The ones they deemed unworthy." The words hit Cable like a slap to the face. Exiles? Cast-offs? Had the Council sent him here to die, or was there more to this mission than he realized? Kisan spoke again, his voice low and filled with quiet wisdom. "You were not sent here to be erased, human. They hoped you would fail. But this world is not your death. It is your awakening." Cable's jaw tightened as the realization hit him like a jolt of lightning. The Council hadn't just set him up, they had betrayed him. He was not just a soldier on a mission, he was their pawn, a tool to be discarded when his usefulness ran out. Vexus Prime was their dumping ground, and he was now part of their dirty secret. Kisan stepped closer, his eyes filled with an unspoken promise. "You were not meant to die. You were meant to fight. We will fight together, Cable Barnes. The Vexans have always risen against the Council. It is time for us to rise again." The revelation struck Cable hard, but in the depths of his gut, something began to burn. Anger. Betrayal. But most of all, determination. The Council had underestimated him. They had sent him here, thinking him a pawn to be forgotten, but Cable Barnes was not the kind of man who would be erased. He stood tall, his shoulders square as he looked Kisan in the eyes. I didn't come here to be anyone's casualty. I didn't come here to be forgotten. You're right. They thought they could break me. But they've made a mistake. Kisan's expression softened, an approving glimmer in his ancient eyes. Then you will rise with us, Cable Barnes. Together, we will bring down the council. Cable's eyes burned with a fierce fire. The Vexans had their reasons for fighting the council, just as he did. The bond between them formed through shared betrayal and hardship was undeniable. We will make them regret this, Cable said, his voice hard with resolve. The council's days are numbered. And I'll make sure they know what happens when they mess with humanity. With that, Cable's path was clear. He was no longer a soldier. He was a leader, a symbol of defiance. And with Kisan and the Vexans by his side, he would fight to reclaim his freedom and to show the council just how wrong they had been. As Cable spent more time with the Vexans, he began to understand the depth of their struggle. Their world, once a sanctuary for exiles and the forgotten, was now a crucible of resistance. They had been cast aside, their homes destroyed, their futures stolen by a council that deemed them unworthy. Yet in the midst of their suffering, they had found strength not just in survival, but in the hope of fighting back. The Vexans were unlike any beings Cable had encountered before. Their bodies, though lithe and humanoid, were marked with bioluminescent veins that pulsed in rhythm with their hearts, a visible testament to their connection with the land they had come to protect. Their culture was steeped in the traditions of survival, their society built from the very bones of Vexus Prime. Their homes were living structures, formed from the organic matter of the planet itself, sprawling beneath the twisted trees and glowing peaks of their homeland. Cable learned quickly. His military training, honed in countless battles, became invaluable to the Vexans. They were quick to teach him their ways, the art of using the land as both weapon and shield. He trained with the Vexan warriors, their movements swift and fluid, their combat style a blend of precision and wild instinct. They taught him to fight not just with weapons, but with the earth beneath his feet. Azra, the massive creature Cable had befriended, became more than just a companion. With its towering form and razor-sharp claws, Azra became his symbol of power, a creature born of the planet's primal forces. Together, they were unstoppable, an embodiment of the untamed strength of Vexus Prime. Cable's bond with Azra deepened with each passing day. The beast was not just an ally, it was his equal, its feral intelligence matching his own. He had learned to trust the creature's instincts, and in return, Azra had come to see Cable not as a human, but as a leader worthy of respect. As the days wore on, the Vexans rallied behind Cable, their trust in him growing with every battle won, every skirmish fought. The planet's wild beasts, the creatures once thought to be mindless predators, now stood with them as allies. They hunted together, fought together, and grew stronger with each passing victory. Cable had become more than just a man, he had become the embodiment of the Vexans' defiance. With Cable's leadership, the Vexans began to form a plan. They knew the Council's forces were vast, their reach endless, but they also knew the Council's greatest weakness, its hubris. The Council believed itself invincible, its power absolute. And yet, here they were, on the fringes of the galaxy, waging a revolution with nothing more than a ragtag group of exiles and beasts. The Vexans, under Cable's command, began gathering resources from the land. They fashioned weapons from the strange, bioluminescent crystals that grew in the deepest caves of Vexus Prime, their edges sharp enough to slice through the toughest armor. They forged alliances with neighboring outcasts and brought in defectors from the Council's ranks, soldiers who had grown disillusioned with the regime they had once served. The strategic planning was slow but deliberate. Cable knew that a direct assault on the Council's stronghold would be suicide. Instead, they would strike at the heart of the Council's power, using guerrilla tactics to weaken their grip on the galaxy. They would use the terrain, the creatures, and their own ingenuity to hit where the Council was weakest, sowing fear and chaos among their ranks. Cable studied the political landscape of the Council with the Vexan elders. Their knowledge of the galaxy's inner workings, their understanding of the Council's politics, became invaluable. The Council's ministers, who had once viewed Cable as a mere nuisance, now saw him as a force they could no longer ignore. Their arrogance would be their undoing. The day came when Cable was ready. He had gathered his forces, trained them to fight as one, and made his preparations. He wasn't just returning to the Galactic Council as a man, a soldier. He was returning as the leader of a revolution. A force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Cable's ship, the Raven-class Scout, was no longer just a vessel, it was a symbol. It had been modified, outfitted with weapons, and painted with the sigil of the Vexan resistance. As it hurtled through space toward the heart of the Council's domain, Cable stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the stars. He was no longer the pawn, he was the one in control. The Council's arrogance would be their downfall. They had sent him to Vexus Prime, thinking him a simple casualty, but now he was the storm that would sweep them away. With Azra at his side and the Vexans backing him, Cable was ready to show the Council just how wrong they had been. The first blow came swiftly. As Cable's forces descended upon the Council's fleet, they struck from the shadows, overwhelming the Council's outer defenses. The creatures of Vexus Prime, once feared and hunted, were now the Council's worst nightmare. They attacked with ferocity, tearing through the enemy lines with primal instinct and deadly precision. Cable led the charge, his mind sharp, his every move calculated. With Azra by his side, he cut through the Council's soldiers as though they were nothing more than paper. The battle was brutal, the stakes higher than ever, but Cable and his allies fought with a relentless spirit that could not be extinguished. The Council's forces were unprepared for the sheer determination that came crashing down upon them. The rebellion, once dismissed as nothing more than a handful of exiles, had become a tidal wave of destruction. The tide of battle turned quickly. The Council's soldiers, outnumbered and outmatched, began to retreat in fear. At the heart of the chaos, Cable faced the Councilors, those who had once thought they controlled his fate. They begged for mercy, their faces twisted in fear, but Cable showed them none. They had sent him to die, they had abandoned the Vexans to rot, and now, it was their turn to face justice. With a single gesture, Cable gave the order, and the Council's reign of tyranny was shattered. Their leaders fell, not by the force of weapons, but by the strength of a humanity they had never understood. The galaxy watched as the once mighty Council crumbled, their corrupt empire reduced to dust. The news spread like wildfire across the stars. Cable Barnes, the man they had exiled to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, had returned not as a victim, but as a legend. He stood at the helm of a new era, a symbol of hope for the oppressed, a champion for the forgotten. The Vexans, once exiled and abandoned, now had a future. They had reclaimed their home, and together with Cable, they would build a new society, one built on the ideals of freedom, unity, and defiance against tyranny. Cable looked out across the stars, his heart full of resolve. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. There were still those who would seek to oppress, to control, and Cable knew that his fight was only just beginning. But for now, he was no longer just a soldier. He was the leader of a revolution, a protector of Vexus Prime, and the embodiment of the indomitable human spirit. The galaxy had witnessed his rise, and now, nothing could stop him. With Azra at his side and the Vexans behind him, Cable Barnes was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the future was his to shape.